Welcome back. President Trump, he flew to Texas today, that to see family members from the school shooting in Santa Fe. The private meetings come 2 weeks after 10 people were killed at the latest high school spree. And that was just a day after a 13-year-old boy asked a question about school safety that made Sarah Sanders emotional. Here it is.
In my school, we recently had a lockdown zone. One thing that affects mine and other students' mental health is to worry about the fact that we or our friends could get shot at school. Specifically, can you tell me what the administration has done and will do to prevent these senseless tragedies?
I think that as a kid and certainly as a parent, there is nothing that could be more terrifying for a kid to go to school and not feel safe. So I'm sorry that you feel that way. This administration takes it seriously, and the School Safety Commission that the president convened is meeting this week, again an official meeting, to discuss the best ways forward and how we can do every single thing within our power to protect kids in our schools.
Now, this all comes as school shootings keep happening with staggering frequency. Now, we have seen 22 school shootings just this calendar year, and it's only May. That's nearly one per week. On Saturday, a group called Youth Over Guns will be organizing a march over the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're calling for an end to gun violence. And Charlie's daughter, Caroline, is one of the organizers. And Charlie, I start with you. I believe that emotion was genuine and heartfelt by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. However, I was down in D.C. covering the rally, and we covered other rallies around our region, including a large one in New York City, where people palpably feel that either enough is enough or the administration isn't doing enough, and the idea of arming teachers is ludicrous. Obviously not universally shared in this country. We have red and blue states, as we know. But is it a generational thing where I've all but thrown my hands up? I thought after Sandy Hook it would change. Your daughter's perspective and the people marching with her, do they just want their voices heard, or do they think that someone will listen?
I think it's a combination of both. I think that they are hopeful that people will listen. It's fascinating. I get choked up too. It's fascinating to see a generation that cares about this issue and standing up and trying to do something about it when we have failed to do something about it. And having been in politics and continue to be in politics, to see kids doing things that we cannot do is empowering in a way, but also to see kids having to really march for their lives is frightening as a parent and as someone who does politics every day. And so if we don't wake up, I don't care what side of the aisle we're on, Republican, Democrat, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we care about fighting for gun control, against it, but to stand up and sort of figure out what the hell to do about this. I don't care if you own a gun, don't own a gun, but to listen to our kids and hear what they're saying on trying to do something about it, having kids who are being shot every day in school, and having our kids going into lockdown every day, and as parents wondering if your kids are going to be safe. I mean, I don't care if you're black, white, brown. It's terrifying.
Jerrica, for me, the greatest indictment has been our collective, at least our generation's, acceptance for the unacceptable. And it happens so frequently. Andrew will tell you, we're putting rundowns, different dateline, different city, and sometimes you don't even lead with another school shooting. I just think the craziness of this, we're so inured to it. And God bless the kids. And I was down in D.C., and it takes a lot for a jaded guy like me who's so cynical about everything. They have more courage in their pinkies than we do. I mean, I'm not even blaming all the lawmakers. How about the rest of the adults standing up and saying, really, our answer to this is to arm the lunch lady? I mean, we're going to look back in history with such embarrassment over our inaction and ineptitude on this. I mean, shame on, I'm not just blaming the Republican Party. Shame on all of us that we haven't done anything. It's insane. And we got to rely on kids to take the lead.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I think the key word is courage. These kids have political courage. I remember what it was like when I was a kid and Columbine happened. I think everyone in my class, everyone in our school lived in fear, are we going to be next? But this generation, they inspire me because instead of just being in that space of fear, they've, taken their fear and turned it into action. And they've done exactly what adults should be doing. And one thing that I think about when I think about this movement that's happening all across the country is I think of the civil rights movement. If we look back to it and its success and its gains, so much of it was because of the young people that had the courage to stand up, whether that was to march, whether it was to sit in, whether it was to boycott or to freedom ride, that really turned the tide. And so I am hopeful because you have a new generation that's civically engaged and they care. And if the adults aren't going to listen, they've clearly said that, we're going to vote you out and make the change. So that's really inspiring.
Here's what was going through my mind as I was listening to Charlie talk about his daughter, and you do her a great credit with the emotion that you bring to it and with your support for her. We're all grizzled veterans of politics. We've been through a lot of this before. We've seen attempts for change fail, and we've seen successes after long periods of time. The kids today, Charlie's daughter, or the kids from Parkland, or the other kids who are active in all of this, I wonder what happens when what they're pushing for doesn't happen, at least not initially, because it won't. I mean, you might get marginal changes, but odds are you won't. At the very least, some of the bigger issues like assault weapons will be left on the table, and that's the best case scenario at this point. Do the kids lose their fervor? Do the kids lose that sense of dedication, and do they start becoming more disaffected voters like so many Americans are after suffering through the political process for so long? That's what I worry about.
It's funny, I look at this through the lens of my kids, and I got 2 teenagers and one just about there. If you remember gay marriage and gay rights, and the idea was if you were courageous, you might be supportive of a civil union. Like, that took political courage to even go. With the velocity that it became, if you were against it, you better be in the reddest of red areas, because otherwise you could even be, you might even lose your office because of that, because you were seen as such a troglodyte, right? I think the same thing's happening. I see it with kids whose families are Republican. They all think it's crazy what's going on with the guns in schools. There were Republicans that were down in D.C. for that March for Our Lives and everything else. It's when, not if, I think this changes. I just would hope that when is sooner than later, because, we all bear responsibility the next time there's a shooting, and we just say, well, what can you do?
And I think the important thing is that I think what most kids want is really for us to focus.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of times we just sort of write it off and go to the next thing. I think really.
But they're asking for specific things. That's
They
what
are.
impressed me about these kids. It isn't just like no more. They said exactly what no more of. And that's why I think as much as people wanted to disregard them and marginalize them, and look what happened to Laura Ingrams of the world who tried this, they paid a price for it. I am, because of the kids, it's the first time at least since Newtown that I think something might happen. And you know what? Good for your kid. And good for her to do
She
it.
still does not get to use the car, but other than that, I'm proud.
You
of
should
her.
be. Coming up next, the Roseanne controversy continues, and now some people are saying that this didn't happen in a vacuum. The president created this kind of atmosphere. Also, Samantha Bee says something that crossed a line here, as many would say as well. We'll talk about all those incidences and why they're happening with such frequency lately.